I was helping a grandmother with a real estate matter. And we ended up prevailing in court, which was very gratifying. But what was eye-opening for me during that lawsuit was the lack of resources that she had at her disposal. We're never going to replace the need for the human touch in the law. Deepfakes are probably the biggest challenge for my commercial clients because you can have, a video showing anything. And then if that gets circulated on social media, they're presumed negligent in the court of public opinion before we ever get to trial. The beautiful thing about AI is it can act as your secretary. It's not going to do the law or the content for you, but it can help you with the back office management stuff.
This is The Litigator's Edge, the podcast where smart strategy, practical innovation, and real-world experience come together to move litigation forward. Each week, we sit down with attorneys, legal tech leaders, and trusted advisors who are rethinking how great legal work gets done. You'll hear how law firms are building a competitive advantage. These conversations are grounded, insightful, and designed to help you refine how you work and how you win. Here is your host, Aniket Sawant.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Litigator's Edge, the podcast where innovative attorneys reveal the strategies that have transformed their legal practice. My name is Aniket Sawant, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Threadio. My guest today is a trusted and versatile legal counselor who is equally comfortable navigating complex insurance litigation and the deeply personal work of adoption law. What makes her perspective so unique is her experience as a trustee for a major employer, giving her an insider's view on corporate governance, combined with her on-the-ground work facilitating a legal clinic for women in her community. It's my pleasure to welcome CJ Evans to the podcast. Welcome, CJ, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Aniket. It's really nice to set aside some time today and talk about this.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure as well. So, CJ, as you know, we always like to start by asking each of our guests to share either a fun fact about themselves or a cringe joke. Which will it be for you and what is it?
Okay. Well, to pay a little homage to my background as a plaintiff's attorney, let me see if you've heard this one. Why did the lawyer cross the road?
That should sound like a simple one, but no, I do not know why did the lawyer cross the road?
To get to the car accident on the other side.
Oh my gosh. That's a good one.
Yeah. But now as on the defense side, I can kind of poke fun at.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. CJ, so, I think of every attorney who makes the time to come on this podcast as a superhero, and every superhero has an origin story, and you just shared a couple of glimpses into yours. Can you please share a little bit more about what got you started?
Yes. Well, my parents encouraged me to pursue the law because even as a young child, I answered every question with a question. And so I took the LSAT during college and kind of had that in my back pocket. I ended up teaching after college, not going straight to law school, but after a few years, I was kind of burnt out from that. And my parents encouraged me to re-examine law school. And so I did. I went to Regent in Virginia Beach. It's a fairly regional law school, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to Texas law. But I graduated, took Barbary, and learned, a bunch of Texas law all within, 8-12 weeks for the bar exam. And I've been practicing in Texas for over 20 years now.
That's amazing. So it was something that you decided to pursue after a different career path, and obviously you've stuck around.
Yes, and I really enjoyed law school, and then even despite the challenges of entering a new industry as a baby lawyer, I really enjoyed the work of being a lawyer. I started out on the defense side, working for an insurance defense firm in the Rio Grande Valley. And if you're familiar with Texas at all, the Valley has a real unique verdict history compared to the rest of the state. So I just jumped in the deep end. One of my very first depositions was on a death case in Starr County, which is famous for big nuclear verdicts. And so I really enjoyed that, just jumping in right away. After several years of practice, I went in-house with Travelers, and I enjoyed that. Not only did I get to do just traditional defense stuff, I got to do a little subrogation stuff, some first party work. And then on behalf of the entity, I would occasionally go down to the legislature and monitor hearings, anything that had to do with insurance law or insurance defense. So that was nice to kind of diversify the content of my practice. And then when kids started coming along, I changed things up a bit and did plaintiff's work for several years. I speak Spanish, which that came in really handy. I started getting a lot of Spanish-speaking clients, and one recommendation led to the other. And so I enjoyed doing that without having to do much by way of marketing or advertising. But the laws in Texas changed somewhat. The barratry laws changed. And so I had to change and modify my approach as well. And then I ultimately ended up back on the defense side. I've been with the Willis Law Group, where I am now, for just shy of 5 years. And I really enjoy having been on both sides of the bar, plaintiffs and defendants. And then, of course, as you mentioned earlier, my work in adoption law. And I still do a lot of pro bono work around that and other family law matters with my work at the Women's Center of Tarrant County.
Thank you for sharing that, CJ. Well, first of all, going back to something you shared post law school, which is that in about 8 to 12 weeks, you basically absorbed all the knowledge you could for the Texas bar exam. Is that
yes?
Right?
For Texas specific statutes, I spent those 3 years prior learning how to think like a lawyer and analyze. But really, occasionally, the teachers would say, pull the statutes from your state or this or that. But really, I learned a lot of Virginia law that I have no use for, but I learned to learn. And that's what I applied in that Barbary course, and just absorbed all that Texas law and did pass the bar exam the first time.
That's amazing. So if I can recap your trajectory, so you started with defense, then you moved to plaintiff, and then now you're back in defense. I'm just trying to get a sense of
in terms of plaintiff's work, I've done just traditional personal injury, car wreck, or slip and fall. But then I've also done a lot of work in first party plaintiff's work. So for example, I represented a bunch of commercial property owners who had disputes over hail damage. And that can be very lengthy and protracted litigation. It's oftentimes in federal court because of diversity jurisdiction. So those are much more tedious lawsuits in that sense, but they're not personal injury lawsuits. So again, it's a different sort of strategy and approach from the plaintiff side when you have to kind of move the ball down the field, so to speak.
Makes sense. And then some of the more, let's call it personal work, meaning family adoption, is that through the pro bono work that you do?
Yes. I, was raised to give back. And I knew no matter what industry I ended up in, I would give back because that's something I saw my parents do through their work. And so when I began practicing in the Valley, I was asked to help lead a legal clinic down there. When I spoke Spanish to the attendees and they weren't having to use an interpreter, they quickly started using me more, and I really enjoyed that. So even though I might have a day or a week where I'm squabbling over discovery issues, or I'm having to, cite this tedious brief or something, kind of doing really heavy work, but then going and helping people in the evening or on the weekends through the work at the legal clinic, it was just so rewarding. It's just something I've kept up since then. And then when my family and I moved to North Texas, so now I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So when we moved to North Texas about 18 years ago, I quickly looked for another place to volunteer in a similar fashion and have really enjoyed my work there. Most of the items that I assist with in the legal clinic tend to be family law related, but I've also done a fair amount of real estate or probate type advisement in that pro bono work.
That's good. And I'm sure the community, both where you were previously in the Valley and then also in North Texas, deeply appreciate the work that you do. I've no doubt about that. Can you share maybe one or two examples from the work that you do at the clinic, and then outside of that, the work that you do in the law firm, in terms of matters that truly changed or shaped how you think and how you operate as an attorney?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is in a pro bono case I had where I was helping a grandmother deal with a real estate matter. And we ended up prevailing in court, which was very gratifying. It's always gratifying, but it's really gratifying when you're helping someone really in need. But what was eye-opening for me during that lawsuit was the lack of resources that she had at her disposal. And I was really thankful I was able to step in a moment that she really needed it and that I had the resources that she needed. I was able to walk her through the litigation and represent her at trial. And so I was very thankful that I had those resources and knowledge and could share with her. And then in terms of my private practice and defense, I have seen that as well with some of my clients or their employees who I end up talking with at length throughout the life cycle of a lawsuit. Oftentimes, if it's in the part of a lawsuit, I just direct them where they need. We're going to do this. We're going to respond this way. We're going to object in this way. We're calling this witness. But then other times they'll come to me and they'll say, Miss, I have this issue and I don't know what to do. And of course, I don't represent them in anything outside the scope of that specific lawsuit, but I can still point them in the right direction. And I always try to have that posture of continual help with the clients, whether it's a commercial client, their employee, whoever. The clients don't forget it when you help.
That's really nice. In terms of the two sort of parallel worlds that you live in or inhabit, which is the clinic and then your private practice, have you had any instances of lessons that you learned from one side that you've applied to the other and vice versa?
Well, I would say one thing that I've learned and honed on the private practice side is just to always give excellent service, particularly when you're trying to shape a book of business or court a client. You're not going to get that business by just giving average service. It has to be the best. My law firm now, the Willis Law Group, the tagline is the standard in defense. We want to be the highest standard of legal services that can be provided. And so in that vein, even at the legal clinic, I might be tired, have had a full day in court, or my brain is just kaput, but I still show up at that monthly legal clinic giving excellent service client or that patron needs in that moment.
That's fantastic. Well, one of the things that came up when I was researching your bio was your colleagues often describe you as a fixer. What does that mean to you?
Well, if there's a problem in a lawsuit, or just bring it to me and let's think it through. And because it does seem like sometimes things can get jammed up, whether it's procedurally or through the rules of discovery, or even sometimes through local rules. In Texas, we have our rules of civil procedure, but then judges can have their own rules as long as they're not in direct contradiction. And so sometimes things can just get jammed up. Particularly here in North Texas, we've seen a lot of backup in the larger counties post-COVID. Their trial backup is still it's going to be years to unravel. So a case can just get literally stuck. And so sometimes it's good to, even with my own cases, take a break and then come back to it with a fresh set of eyes, because there's usually a solution that you're not seeing.
Makes sense. In situations where there are backups of the kind you mentioned, and it's kind of incredible that coming up on 6 years post-COVID that there are still backlogs that need to be dealt with. What sort of solutions at a high level do you look at? Maybe alternative dispute resolution, arbitration, mediation, that sort of thing, or are there other procedural, sort of fast tracking that you can perform within the court system?
Yeah, great question. So in most counties here in North Texas, and I should clarify, we litigate all over the state, but my practice is primarily here in North Texas. But most counties, mediation is required, which also means that the mediators get backed up and the good ones get really backed up. And so what I try to do is almost as soon as initial discovery is served, just go ahead and schedule mediation. Even if it's 6, 9, 12 months out, it's on the books and we have something to work towards. And, staying on top of recent verdicts of the county of venue, but then also surrounding counties is really important as well, because if the adjuster is going on a pre-COVID verdict analysis, that's not accurate. And so they may be undervaluing a case that should be settled. And so one, staying on top of the verdicts is really important. I mean, we are constantly searching those verdicts. And then another way to be innovative in terms of getting cases settled or moved along is to consider arbitration. Of course, that needs to be approved by the client because sometimes arbitration, the different ARB groups have their own rules and they act like the rules of evidence. But before you submit your client to those, you got to get permission. But that's another avenue to accelerate settlement. It's in essence a trial just through the ARB organization, not the court system.
Makes sense. Switching gears a little bit to another aspect of your professional career, which is that you've served as a trustee for the third largest employer in Tarrant County, overseeing governance and risk. What are some key learnings from that experience, and what can you share with our audience?
I really enjoyed my time as trustee for the Fort Worth ISD, and I served during COVID, so I was on the board from 2019 to 2023. One of the things that I learned is the sky is not falling. We all felt it was, in spring of 2020, but we got through it. And so that's kind of my big takeaway from that. Another key element was to work with a group because Fort Worth ISD School Board was a board of 9, depending on the size of the district. That can be various sizes, 7, 11, that sort of thing. But I had 8 best friends that I had to try to work with to do what was best for students. And so that was a challenging but also rewarding part of the work.
That's cool. Was that a role that you got into? Was that part of your private practice? Was that through the legal clinic, or was that something else entirely?
Well, I kind of just got into that through being a PTA mom. In addition to working all these years, I'm first and foremost mom. And so did just the PTA thing, volunteering, this and that. And one thing led to another in terms of an opportunity to serve my kids' campus and then the district overall. And I felt like my skill set as a lawyer and being bilingual was helpful to serve the position for that time.
So given this role that you played, within the school district, starting with PTA mom and then obviously your private practice and all the entire trajectory that it's taken, and then the legal clinic, what's your secret sauce to managing all of these different responsibilities, the different skill sets that they require? How do you, what's the secret sauce there?
Okay, well, the first secret is a little caffeine. A little caffeine goes a long way. No, I'm teasing. Yes, it is a kind of a bunch of different buckets, but the skill sets are overlapping. The organizational, in taking large volumes of information and assessing it and then acting on it. One time with another volunteer mom, we spent about 3 hours doing the PTA's taxes. I outsourced my own taxes, but it was just assessing the information, reading it, So the skill sets do overlap, and that's helpful. And just like, I guess, in any sort of litigation, you prioritize the thing that's most important. You prioritize that case that's going to trial next month, but you still work on all the other cases throughout the week. You just may emphasize one over the other for a pressing matter, but it all seemed to work out in the end. So
that's great. Switching gears now to innovation and technology, and obviously you have some key underlying principles that you just shared in terms of how you manage these disparate demands. And you mentioned a couple of interesting things at the beginning, which is some cases are tedious and just need to be worked through. There's a lot of research that needs to be done in terms of staying on top of the latest verdicts. To me, a couple of those comments really resonated in terms of, hey, here are some potential ways in which technology could play an ever-increasing role. So can you maybe talk about how you use technology, not just AI, which we can obviously talk about, but just in general, what is your approach to using technology to stay on top of all these various items that you need to look at?
Yes. Well, AI is here, and it's not a matter of not using it. It's a matter of using it ethically and responsibly. So I'm not shy with it or any sort of research tool online. LexisNexis is the one we prefer here at the firm. And so just in terms of the verdict analysis, LexisNexis is on it. There's another one called Trellis that's specific to Texas verdicts. So we utilize those in terms of just constant researching. And then in terms of other AI products, okay, so in my free time, I'm starting to write a little about insurance law and the implications, and the practical implications in Texas. Specifically, there's been some Supreme Court rulings over the last 5 years that directly affect property owners in that regard. And I can write it because I do it. I do this work. I can write it. I can cite it. I know how to research and compile the information. What is tedious for me is identifying which journal to publish it in. That's administrative type stuff. And I have been able to utilize AI to help me identify which publications are accepting submissions, which publications deal with my topical areas of law, that sort of thing. So I do utilize AI to be more efficient and more organized.
Makes sense. So you did mention that AI is here and there's a need to use it ethically. It's a view that is increasingly shared by more and more attorneys, but still there are some who do not share that view. So in your opinion or in your experience, what are some common misconceptions that maybe some of your fellow attorneys might have around AI, and what would you tell them in terms of how to overcome those?
Well, AI doesn't do the work for you. It just will assemble the information, essentially. At least that's how I utilize it. So you still have to use your brain. You still have to analyze what's there, and you still have to prioritize the information as it's fed to you. And you still have to know the content. That's the thing. AI is not going to replace lawyers. It is going to change the industry somewhat, as it can assist with administrative functions and gathering of information. But we are still going to need industry-wide the human touch. But just as a practical example, so earlier this fall, I took the board exam for the legal specialization in insurance law. And you have to be qualified to sit for it. Not everybody who even applies is allowed to sit for it. And so I did use AI to gather and accumulate the various insurance codes and this and that. And then even tried to do some practice essay questions. It was very helpful in terms of giving me real-time feedback on how to draft a question or draft a response. But there was one time where it actually spit just a tidbit of a fact that I knew to be wrong because I know the content. And then I thought, do I understand the law wrong? Let me go and research it. Well, I went and researched it, and sure enough, I was right. And so because I knew the content, I was able to, weed out some misinformation that AI was feeding me. So my response to any lawyer that says that, or to someone who's considering the law, we're never going to replace the need for the human touch in the law.
That makes sense. And especially AI is such a quote unquote smooth talker that it's easy to believe everything that it says because there's no typos, everything sounds accurate. And so you do have to rely on your own intrinsic knowledge and intuition developed as a result of that knowledge to actually cross-check, which is what you did. That's great. Thinking about technology and AI in the context of the clients that you represent. So AI is sort of a general purpose technology. It can be used for many different reasons. It can be used for both good and maybe not so good. And so in your opinion, in your experience, how do you see advanced technologies, including AI, create new risks or liabilities for some of the businesses that you represent? And what challenges exist in terms of compliance for your clients? And then how do you advise these clients to get ahead of those risks?
Well, that's a loaded question, but it's a great one. Well, in terms of some dangerous aspects for AI, deepfakes are probably the biggest challenge for my commercial clients, because you can have a video showing anything, showing a slip and fall that actually didn't happen. And then if that gets circulated on social media or this or that, well, then they're presumed negligent in the court of public opinion before we ever get to trial. So for my commercial clients, that's one of the biggest challenges. And then in terms of also monitoring social media and stuff that's posted, even seemingly posted by them, but it's not posted by them. It could be some AI bot, because of course, social media stuff is discoverable and can be admissible evidence. And so that's also a danger. Large in part, though, my commercial clients are very open to it. especially as it assists in bill saving. I mean, what might have used to taking me, let's say, 6 hours to do a certain brief, well, now because of the accumulation of information that AI kind of just will, put in my lap, now that brief only takes me 3.5 hours instead of 6 or something. So overall, my commercial clients know it's here and they're leaning into it. The clients that I work with in the legal clinic, they will oftentimes ask me stuff. If it's outside the scope of family law, I don't have that information at the tip of my tongue. I'm not a walking encyclopedia of all Texas codes, right? And so I will even say to them, I don't know that information, but let's find it out together. And again, AI spits back the answer for us, but it takes the human attorney to actually assess it and apply it in a nuanced manner to that person's specific situation. But I do even encourage my clients in the legal clinic to use it where applicable. So.
Yeah, on that last point, thank you for sharing that. What are your thoughts on people doing their own quote unquote research on ChatGPT, especially those with fewer resources like the grandmother you mentioned? Like, maybe at that time she may or may not have had access to advanced AI. But what is your thinking around resource limited individuals using ChatGPT or AI as a first pass?
It could be helpful as a way to start understanding their legal issue, but oftentimes they're not going to know if misinformation is included with the good information. And then also, oftentimes they don't know what to put in to ask the right question. So we saw that in the early 2000s a lot with these DIY wills online, but people didn't know what to put. They didn't know that, okay, this asset I have in another state from my uncle who died, I have to calculate that in. And so oftentimes that's the danger, is they don't know what all pertinent information to put in. But I do encourage it as a way to get started to understanding a question or a legal issue. Because a lot of times people just don't even understand their legal options in front of them.
Makes sense. Looking ahead, obviously, you personally are at the forefront of adopting AI throughout your practice, wherever appropriate and judicious. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for innovation in legal practice using AI or other technologies over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, one of the things for us here at the Willis Law Group, because we have offices in several states, it is really helping us streamline our processes and procedures. And that sounds like, oh, well, that's something HR should take care of, or, oh, that grows organically. But you know what? When we're serving a national client and we're representing them in lawsuits in Pennsylvania and Florida and Texas, they need to have uniform, consistent service in real time. And so that's one of the things that we as a big defense firm are able to lean into and provide.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, CJ, this has been a great conversation. Just a couple of quick questions to close us out today. So, what advice would you give to a young lawyer today who's sort of, thinking about the career in front of them, maybe fresh out of law school, just like you were all those years ago, and they're not sure which direction they want to go or how they want to serve the community through their law degree or otherwise? How, in your opinion, can they build a successful, meaningful career as an attorney and sort of give back in the way that you have?
Okay. Well, I actually have 2 answers to that question. So the first one, for baby lawyers straight out of law school, I recommend you go to a law firm and learn and go in person. Don't get a job. Don't look for a job that allows for 100% remote work. You're not going to learn as much sitting from your home office as you would from an office where there's other attorneys. You don't realize how much you pick up just from water cooler talk. You pass somebody in the break room and you learn. So I would highly recommend going with a firm, not setting up your own solo practice right out of law school, and connect with older lawyers and get a mentor, and because you don't know what you don't know. And so that would be my advice first for young lawyers right out of law school. Second, though, one thing that I do see in the legal field, is for females who kind of have to start over, in a sense, after 5 or 10 years of practice once kids come along, and they may take a break or go half time. And then they'll kind of gear back into full-time practice. So for those lawyers, I would say, just speaking from experience, you will never regret slowing things down a little during those years when your children are young. But then the beautiful thing about AI is it can act as your secretary. You can gear back up half-time or part-time. Or if a female lawyer had been practicing prior to having children, well, she knows how to run a practice. She knows how to work cases up. And so that might be a scenario that's worth exploring a solo practice, because with AI now, you could really have enhanced resources at your fingertips for managing that practice. It's not going to do the law or the content for you, but it can help you with the back office management stuff.
That's an intriguing insight. So it actually does serve to level the playing field for those who, may have to step out for personal reasons, for kids and other reasons. And so you're not starting off at as much of potentially a disadvantage, because the AI can take care of a lot of the administrative matters. That's amazing, because obviously you still have your legal brain with you. And then as long as the AI can do all these other things.
Yes. And I did, for kind of a hot minute when my kids were really young and I was in between firms, I did quite a bit of guardian ad litem work. And of course that went hand in hand with some of the adoption work that I had done. But you still have to prepare exhibits to submit to the judge, even if in uncontested matters. And so, this was, 15 years ago when I was doing guardian ad litem appointments. But I can only imagine now how easy it would be to prepare all these exhibits and everything without a legal assistant, because AI can help.
All right, CJ, final question. Is there a question that I should have asked you, but I didn't?
Well, how much time do you have? I would just say I really have enjoyed the work that I've done so far in my 20 plus years. And I feel like I'm just getting started. And so I really look forward to the next 20 plus, and whether that's serving on more boards or parlaying my work in insurance law into maybe part-time teaching or something. I don't know, but I do enjoy the study of law and the practice of law. And I'm really thankful that my parents encouraged me to explore it. So.
Thank you for sharing that. The world for sure needs more people like you who give back and who serve. So thank you for doing that. Well, CJ, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience did as well. Thank you so much, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
The Litigator's Edge podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.